When people talk about the Constitution, they're talking about the foundational rulebook for the United States. Think of it as the ultimate operating manual for our country. It's the highest form of law in the land, establishing who has power, how that power is exercised, and, most importantly, how that power is kept in check. Without this document, our entire system of government simply wouldn't exist. It's what holds the entire structure together. The people who wrote the Constitution, the framers, had just fought a war against a powerful king, so they were terrified of creating a new government that was just as tyrannical. Their solution was the principle of limited government. They decided that the government wouldn't be all-powerful. It could only do the things that the Constitution explicitly allowed it to do. If a government official tries to do something outside those defined powers, they are acting unconstitutionally. If the government's power is limited, where does the real power come from? That's where popular sovereignty comes in. This is the simple but profound idea that the people are the source of all government authority. The government exists only because we, the citizens, allow it to exist or consent to be governed. When you vote, whether for a president or a local mayor, you are directly exercising the principle of popular sovereignty. It reminds politicians that they work for us. Another essential safeguard is the rule of law. This principle is easy to state but essential to uphold. No one is above the law. If a senator commits a crime, they must face the consequences just like any ordinary citizen. If the president breaks a regulation, they are subject to legal checks. The rule of law ensures that power is not arbitrary and that even the most influential people in government have to follow the same established rules. To make sure power is never concentrated in one place, the framers adopted separation of powers. They divided the government into three distinct co-equal branches. We have the legislative branch, Congress, to write the laws, the executive branch, the president, to enforce them, and the judicial branch, the courts, to interpret them. This division ensures that the responsibility for governing is spread out, making it harder for any single person to seize control. Separation of powers is a great start, but it needs a backup plan. That's the purpose of checks and balances. This system gives each branch specific tools to restrain the others. Think of it like a three-way tug of war where everyone is constantly keeping the others honest. For instance, the president can check Congress by vetoing a bill, but Congress can check the president right back by overriding that veto. Let's look at how Congress restrains the president. The legislative branch holds some serious power over the executive. If Congress doesn't like a treaty the president signed, the Senate can reject it. If the president hires someone for the Supreme Court, the Senate has to approve that person. And in the most serious cases, Congress can use its power of impeachment to investigate and potentially remove the president from office. On the flip side, the president has ways to check Congress. The most common check is the veto power. If Congress passes a law the president thinks is bad or unconstitutional, the president can simply reject it, sending it back to Congress. Also, as commander-in-chief, the president controls the military, giving him immense power that Congress ultimately funds but does not directly command. The judicial branch holds one of the most powerful checks of all. Imagine Congress passes a law and the president signs it, but people feel it violates their rights. They can challenge it in court. Eventually, the Supreme Court can use its power of judicial review to strike down that law as unconstitutional. This check ensures that both the other branches stay within the limits defined by the Constitution. That powerful check, judicial review, is the court's authority to examine the actions of the executive and legislative branches to determine if they are consistent with the Constitution. It's interesting because the Constitution doesn't actually mention judicial review. It was established in 1803 in the landmark Supreme Court case Marbury versus Madison. This established the court as the final authority on the meaning of the Constitution. The principle of federalism deals with how power is distributed vertically between the national government in Washington, D.C., and the state governments. The framers created this shared system because they wanted national unity, but didn't want to completely wipe out the power of the individual states. Federalism ensures that there's a balance. Some decisions are made nationally, and others are reserved for local state governments. Federalism divides powers into three types, and the first is delegated powers. These are the powers specifically given to the federal government. Think of things that need to be uniform across the entire country: printing currency, maintaining an army, or running the postal service. If every state had its own army or printed its own money, the country couldn't function as a single nation. The opposite of delegated powers are the reserved powers, which are given to the state governments. These are protected by the 10th Amendment. Reserved powers cover issues that affect local communities differently, like creating local school districts, issuing driver's licenses, or deciding marriage laws. This allows states to be laboratories of democracy, experimenting with different policies to see what works best for their citizens. Then there are the concurrent powers, which are shared by both the federal and state governments. The most familiar example is the power to collect taxes. Both the IRS, federal, and your state revenue department collect taxes from you. Building roads and establishing courts are other great examples. These shared powers show that the two levels of government aren't entirely separate. They have to work together to govern the people. What happens when a state law conflicts with a federal law? The Supremacy Clause settles the argument. Found in Article 6, it states clearly that the Constitution and any federal law passed under it is the supreme law of the land. This means that if a state passes a law that contradicts a federal law, the state law must be struck down. This clause is what prevents states from acting like independent countries. The Necessary and Proper Clause, sometimes called the Elastic Clause, is found in Article 1. This clause gives Congress the power to make any laws that are necessary and proper to carry out its specific powers. Think of it like a piece of elastic. It allows Congress to stretch its authority to deal with new problems not specifically mentioned in 1787. For instance, Congress uses this clause to justify creating agencies like the Federal Reserve or regulating the Internet. The final core principle, and arguably the most important for daily life, is the protection of individual rights and liberties. The first 10 amendments, known as the Bill of Rights, were added specifically to guarantee personal freedoms. Rights like the freedom of speech, freedom of religion, and the right to a fair trial are the ultimate proof of a limited government. These protections ensure the government can't infringe on your fundamental freedoms. A crucial part of your individual rights is due process. This is the idea that the government has to treat you fairly and follow established rules when taking any action against you. For example, if you are accused of a crime, due process guarantees your right to a lawyer, your right to know the charges against you, and your protection from illegal search and seizure. It's the legal shield that protects citizens from government overreach. The framers knew they couldn't predict the future, so they made the Constitution a living document that could be changed. This is the amendment process. It's intentionally difficult, requiring a 2/3 vote in both houses of Congress to propose an amendment, and then ratification by 3/4 of the states. It's a high hurdle, which is why we've only successfully amended it 27 times, but it guarantees stability while allowing for essential change. Ultimately, the 7 core principles we've discussed, from popular sovereignty to individual rights, don't exist in isolation. They form an interconnected system designed to prevent tyranny and maximize liberty. The Constitution is a brilliant design, but it's not a self-operating machine. Its success depends entirely on informed citizens like you, who understand these principles, participate in the process, and demand that their government adheres to the supreme law of the land.